So first and foremost, as usual, before we commence the sermon, let us all take a moment to remind ourselves that we are so extremely fortunate to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching. As disciples of the Buddha, the perfect one, the omniscient one, the gracious one, the magnificent one, the immaculate one, the infinitely compassionate one, the supremely enlightened and awakened one. Let us remind ourselves of how fortunate we are to be his disciples, to consider him our master, to have him as our teacher to guide us through this entanglement of samsara, through to achieving our liberation. And as we reflect on this, let us all take a moment to recite the Dhirasya Vikada Mohasa Gatha, that which the household Opali once uttered in exoneration of the Buddha, or in salutation and in exaltation of him. And also today I have made available the second stanza for your reflection. I will put them up on screen now. So what we will do is we will recite the first stanza first, and then I will flick the page over and you will be able to recite the second stanza. I have also made the meaning available as we did with the first. So here you see the second stanza. We will move to that in a moment. So if you can all please be upstanding to recite the stanza and pledge our allegiance to the Buddha as his disciples, his lifelong disciples, on our quest to achieving our liberation. He is a master, he is our teacher, and we are his students. Dhirasya Vigata Mohasya Abhinna Kilasya Vijita Vijayasya Anighasya Susamachittasya Buddha Silasya Sadhupanyasya Vesantarasya Vimalasya Bhagavato Tasya Savako Hamasmi. Dhirasya Vigata Mohasya Pabhinna Khilasya Vijita Vijayasya Anighasya Susamachittasya Buddha Silasya Sadhupanyasya Vesantarasya Vimalasya Bhagavato Tasya Savako Hamasmi. Akatankatisya Tusitasya Vantaloka-misasya Muditasya Katasamanasya Manujasya Antima Sarirasya Narasya Anopamasya Virajasya Bhagavato Tasya Savako Hamasmi. Akatankatisya Tusitasya Vantaloka-misasya Muditasya Katasamanasya Manujasya Antima Sarirasya Narasya Anopamasya Virajasya Bhagavato tassa savako hamasmi. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. To observe the precepts and seek refuge in the Noble Triple Gem, please recite all together and after me. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Saranagamaṇaṃ sampunnaṃ. Pānātipātā vēramaṇī sikkhapaдаṃ samādhiyāmi. Adinādāna vēramaṇī sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi. Kāmesu micchāchārā vēramaṇī sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi. Musāvādā vēramaṇī sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi. Surāmeraya majjapamā daṭṭhāna vēramaṇī sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi. Tisaranena saddhiṃ pañcasīlaṃ dhammaṃ sādhukaṃ surakkitaṃ kattvā appamādena sampādeta. Okay, you may all now be seated. And before we commence today's sermon, as we always do, being grateful towards all those who have helped, supported and assisted us to get where we are today, not just in this birth but also in our previous incarnations, all those who came to our rescue in times of need, all those who extended their generosity and charity towards us, towards our betterment and on our behalf. We are today availed of the perfect opportunity to repay debts that we owe them, and that is by giving the gift of Dhamma, which excels all gifts. So let us offer them this opportunity by inviting them to witness this meritorious deed, as well as to listen to the teaching of the Buddha for those who are able to do so. May all those beings who are today born in woeful plains witness this meritorious deed and be able to rejoice in such merits, and may such merits help them to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane. And for all beings in the blissful plane, may they not only rejoice in the merits but also listen to the teaching, understand it, comprehend it, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With compassionate thoughts extended out to all of them, all beings in this 10,000 world systems, as I now make this invitation, I ask you all to extend that invitation in your hearts and your minds out to all of them. May they join us, may they witness this meritorious deed, may they listen to the teaching of the Buddha, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gacchantu Devata Saddhammang Munirajassa Sunantu Sagga Mokkadang Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Bhadanta. And also, before we commence the sermon, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the noble ones, as well as the noble triple gem, for any thoughts, words or actions of revile, desecration, insult or slander, or if our hardships might have caused them, if our actions might have caused them hardship or discomfort. Let us take an opportunity to seek their forgiveness before we commence the sermon, as the consequences of such actions may be that today, as we make efforts to attain our liberation, those efforts are hampered and it becomes extremely difficult for us to understand and comprehend the teaching. Therefore, before we commence, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the Noble Triple Gem, as well as the Buddhas, Samma Sambuddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, Arahata Buddhas, Anagami, Sakradagami, Sotapannas, be they on the path of having attained the fruits, as well as the Buddha's ministry, the Sambuddha Shasana, for any thoughts, words or actions of revile, desecration, slander or insult that we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly. May I be forgiven for such actions, and let us also on this occasion make a firm resolve to discipline ourselves, and thereby to not find ourselves in situations to conduct ourselves in such manner. And let us all make a final resolve that may, through the course of this sermon, you be able to understand the teaching and to redeem yourselves from the four great hells once and for all. May this sermon help you to attain the noble state of Sotapanna. And for any of you who may have already attained that state, may through the course of this sermon you be able to fulfill the subsequent stages and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. With that resolve deep-seated in your minds, I invite you all to prepare yourselves to listen to the sermon. Okay. So I have put on screen for you the second stanza from the Upali, the Householder Sutta. We did discuss the story behind this, so I'm not going to be talking about that today. For any of you who are curious and may not have come across these stanzas, I invite you to go back and listen to the previous sermons, where you will be able to understand the story behind why these stanzas were uttered by a householder by the name of Upali, when asked, "Whose disciple are you from now on?" So we have been reciting the first of the 10 stanzas for a while now, and hopefully now you have almost learnt it by heart, You probably have heard me say it and recited it enough times that it has firmly by-hearted, and I thought it would be a good idea to also share with you the second stanza, which is what you're seeing on screen now. I will briefly talk you through it. As you'll see on screen, the second line following each of the lines in bold is the English translation, and I by no means will admit that the translations are perfect. That is, it's a virtually unachievable goal to not only translate but also to capture the essence of that which cannot be captured in words. And of course we are talking here about names which are used to refer to the Buddha. In this particular sutta we came across 100 names, and what you're seeing on screen now are the second lot of 10. Akatankatis, of him who has no perplexities. There are no confusions in the mind of the Buddha. Everything is clear, and it's crystal clear. He knows it all. He's the all-knowing, all-seeing one, the one individual who is able to do that. Tusitassa. He's content. Tusita is, as you'll be familiar with, is a name of one of the heavens, where it is believed that the deities there are in a state of happiness, bliss and contentment. Obviously we don't mean it in the supramundane sense, but in a worldly sense. So Tusita is a name that refers to the nature of being content or happy. Akatankatissa tusitassa. Vanta lokamisassa. He who has rejected worldly pleasures. So as we understand, worldly pleasures are nothing other than relief from vexation. So for one who has redeemed himself from vexation, clearly there is no room then of experiencing pleasure. So really the Buddha is incapable of experiencing pleasure, because there is no vexation to be relieved from. His mind is free of vexations. Vantalokamissassa muditassa. We have come across one of the 4 abodes of the Brahmas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita and Upeksha. And on my quest to try and translate mudita or muditassa, I think quite a neat translation that I have managed to come across is being merciful. This is to be gracious. So to be at one's mercy, we have heard that expression in the past. That is where one is capable of perhaps bringing upon you an unwelcome treatment, but when you are at one's mercy, this is where you plead to them or you request them to exonerate you from such treatment, and you appeal to their kind nature to relieve you, to give you some lenience, if you like, to be lenient towards you. So how so in the case of the Buddha? We must understand that the Buddha is the one who has the key to unlock ourselves from the shackles of samsara and to free ourselves once and for all to attain the bliss of Nibbana. So if he's the one who has the key, then clearly we are at his mercy. If you think about it, not that the Buddha would ever be like this, but he has the choice, if you like, to not expound the teaching and had he done so, we would have continued to be in darkness, as is the case with both himself and his disciples. They have the choice to not expound the teaching, to not give you the key to redeem themselves from the suffering, and therefore not free yourself from suffering and be stuck in this endless loop of suffering. So to be at his mercy is therefore something that we should want to be, because we are appealing to his kindness, to his graciousness, to free us from the suffering that we are in. And also need to bear in mind that the Buddha has nothing to lose by not giving us the teaching. He has nothing to lose by not teaching us what he has understood. As you progress in your understanding, you will at some point begin to understand that actually there is no doer in any of these things. It is all cause and effect. But for the time being, in order to help you understand what I mean by this, being merciful, being lenient, being kind and compassionate are all words that can be used to describe this name that we refer to the Buddha, and that is Muditassa. So remember, it's not the assa suffix, that's the assa, that suffix simply means belonging to. So it belongs to. This is why you'll see right at the end of this stanza where we say, of that disciple, of that blessed one I am a disciple. So what is meant here is, remember, this is Upali who's reciting this stanza. He could have just as well said, Akatankatissa savako hamasmi, Tusitassa savako hamasmi, Vantalokamisassa savako hamasmi, and so on. So these are all these names are prefixed, or rather suffixed, with assa, assa, which is a Pali suffix, and that means belonging to. So therefore, the name that is used to refer to the Buddha here is not really Muditassa, but it's Mudita. Hopefully that makes sense. Katasamanassa, Manujassa, one who has completed the task which they embark upon when they renounce worldly existence. So clearly, having renounced worldly existence, both in the spiritual sense and also in the material sense. So in the material sense, that you can consider was when Prince Siddhartha renounced a homely life and he left the palace and went on to become an ascetic. But from a spiritual sense, he was still a worldly being. But when he began to understand the Dhamma and upon achieving enlightenment, he renounced the entire world in its entirety. And by the world here, of course, we mean suffering. And through understanding, through enlightenment, and through the shedding of defilements, true liberation and freedom was achieved. Through the true renunciation, the ultimate renunciation was achieved. So this is what is meant here by Katasamanassa Manujassa. Antima sari rasa narasa. Most of you will be familiar with the word Antima, which is also a common word in Sinhala, which means last. So Antima sari rasa means body. So we are referring to the fact that the Buddha bears his last body. So if you take it simply from a physical point of view, a material point of view, then we are referring to his body, his actual body as a human being. We can talk about the various other more profound meanings, but for the time being I'll leave it at that. narasa meaning a human or a man. So antimasari rasa narasa. This is a man who bears his last body. And so in the translation you can see I've switched the two words around, the simile. So to use a simile, when we offer a simile to describe something, what we are doing is we are explaining or describing something in terms of something else, by using something else as an example, if you like. Now the thing is, with the Buddha you can't use any similes to describe him, because he cannot be compared to anything or anyone. He can only be compared to another Buddha, and they're identical. So he's incomparable. So upama is using a comparison. Anupama is where it is impossible to use a simile to describe who the Buddha is. So for instance, when the Buddha is asked how long is an eon, and he uses similes to express this. When he's asked how often does someone who dies and leaves the human form comes back into existence as a human, he uses similes to describe this. But when it comes to describing who the Buddha is, a simile cannot be used, because he cannot be compared to anyone. Therefore, he is the incomparable one, anopamassa. So again, remember, anopamassa is not a name. Anopama is the name. Asa, again, is the suffix that is used to mean belonging to, or of, rather. Virajasa. Rajas are defilements. They're the cankers. This is a blemish in one's character. So virajasa is the opposite of that. So anupamasa virajasa means he is the incomparable one without blemish. So his character is without blemish. There are no faults to be found in the Buddha, in his conduct, or in any aspect of the Buddha. There are no faults to be found. He is perfect in every way, therefore he is without blemish. And so finally the last line of the stanza, which you are very familiar with, Bhagavato tassa savako hamasmi. Again, Bhagavato tassa. So Bhagavata is a name that is used to refer to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Again, assa, meaning, as we described before, this is the prefix. So Bhagavato tassa savako hamasmi. I, of that Blessed One, am I a disciple. So again, what we see here is the devotion that Upali, the householder, expresses, the devotion that he has for the Buddha that he expresses in words. This is the uncontainable gratitude that he has towards the Buddha, the deep respect and devotion that he has towards him, he's expressing. And he says towards the end of the sutta, you remember, as a garland maker would pick up beautiful flowers, collect beautiful flowers, and then join them together as he makes a garland, as he weaves a garland, with as much ease I have been able to put these names together, which encapsulate the great qualities of the Buddha. With such ease have I been able to do this, because when one has such qualities and attributes which are unsurmountable, which are infinite, then is it any difficulty to achieve something as coming up with names to describe them? So here again he's expressing his dedication, commitment, and deep respect and devotion to both the Buddha and also to the path which is what he has now understood, having become a Sotapanna, by listening to the teaching of the Buddha. So I'll read this once again, I will recite it once again with you. Akatankatissa tusitassa vantalokamissassa muditassa katasamanassa manujassa antimasarirassa narassa anopamassa virajassa bhagavato tassa savako hamasmi. So we will be reciting this going forward after the first 10 names which you are familiar with, and eventually I will be sharing with you all 100 of these names, but we'll do it one at a time, or 10 at a time if you like, and we'll learn the names that can be used to refer to the Buddha, so that one day when someone asks you, perhaps, who is your teacher, or whose teacher are you a disciple of, or which teacher are you a disciple of, then you can pick any one of these 100 names and then tell them, this is who is my teacher. Okay, so it's up on screen, you can take a note of it, and you can take a screenshot later on if you wish to do so. And we will continue with the remainder of the sermon. So I'm going to take this down for now. Okay. Now I want you all to take a moment to see if you can remember what we talked about last week. Some of you may have had an opportunity to go back and listen to last week's sermon. There may be those who have not had the opportunity. But let's see if you can take a moment to go back and remind yourselves of what we talked about last week. We talked about why it's important to first let go, relinquish your bad habits, if you may have any, before you are able to understand the profound teaching of the Buddha. Because with bad habits, with bad behavior, and with an evil or hatred and anger and malice, with a vile heart, it's virtually impossible to understand the teaching of the Buddha. Because remember, like attracts like. So for you to be able to understand something that is so sublime, something so pure, your mind has to become pure. The purer it is, the more you will be able to understand and comprehend it. The more defilements that linger in the deep dark corners of your mind, the more difficult it's going to be to understand something that is pure. Like attracts like. So this is why I emphasized last week that it's really important to make sure that you are changing in your temperament, you are changing in your attitudes, your behaviors towards others, towards your family to begin with, your spouse, your parents, your children, and then your immediate surrounding, your immediate relations, your co-workers and your colleagues, and then going out to your teachers, those who have helped and supported you, to be grateful to them, your friends who will have on plenty of occasions walked into your life and saved you from imminent danger or misfortune, helped you out as best as they could. It may be that today you don't look eye to eye, but we must always remind ourselves that there was one point in which no one else came to our rescue, and it was just them. So in a time when there was no one else for us, there was nothing to cling on to, nothing to hang on to, there was one person who came and helped us. We talked about being able to become incapable. How does one become incapable of hatred and anger and ill will and these negative emotions that destroys the peace in one's mind as well as cause grief towards others? How does one become incapable of that? That has to be the first step on your path. The more incapable you become of anger, greed, desire, the more capable you become of understanding the Dhamma. So if you are still capable of anger, if you are still capable of holding on to grudges, if you are still capable of cursing people, and if you are still capable of mistreating those who have been kind and generous to you, if you are still capable of turning a blind eye to a poor man or someone who needs your help, to your parents, and you can just disregard them and walk away from them when they need your help most, if you are someone who's capable of that, then you're incapable of understanding the Dhamma. Whereas on the flip side, if you're incapable of the former, then you're capable of the latter, which is understanding of the Dhamma. So time and time again, what I wanted to emphasize was, and I have said this in the past, do not make the study of the Dhamma an academic study. It's fine to study the Dhamma, but really the study of the Dhamma is for one purpose, and that is for the study of oneself. We use the Dhamma to study the self. A simple analogy would be when you bring home a bar of soap, you have brought it for one purpose, and that is to clean something. Either that's your body or what you wear, or perhaps your dishes, right? So you don't spend hours and hours studying the bar of soap, analyzing it, cutting it up into pieces and trying to figure out how a soap bar came into existence, what are the constituent parts of it. So you don't do an autopsy on the bar of soap. That is an unnecessary task, because you can spend your time doing it, but it's not going to help you achieve what the bar of soap was designed and invented for in the first place. Once you brought home a bar of soap, what you need to do is make use of it as soon as you possibly can. You only need one bar of soap. You don't go into the washroom taking 2 bars of soap with you. Just take one. And that one bar of soap can clean your entire body. So you don't need 2 for that. And the same analogy applies in the Dhamma. You don't need lots of Dhamma. I see in some circles, and sometimes people come and talk to me about this. They spend a lot of time studying the Dhamma, analyzing its intricacies and ins and outs, and turning it in upside down, and reading the sutras. And again, I'm not condemning it, but at the same time I do advise a little bit of caution, because what can happen, as with anything else, is the more you study the Dhamma, the more pleasurable that activity can become. So as you begin to experience pleasure in the study of the Dhamma, because the way it will happen is, you will come across some point of the Dhamma which is not clear to you, and then you will go on an exploration to try and find the answers to it, to try and find how the whole thing hangs together, how this connects with that, and how that connects with the other. So you will do a lot of research, you will talk to people, you will go and read up the books and watch the sermons, listen to them, and so on and so forth. But then eventually, when you come across the answer to the question that you were looking for, you are now relieved of your vexation. the very vexation that you were trying to put out by taking on the Dhamma, taking the Dhamma on board. So you see, it can be a vicious cycle, and if you're not careful, it can be counterintuitive. So be careful in your study of the Dhamma, because it can be the thing that actually throws you off the path to Nibbana. That's quite ironical again, isn't it? The very Dhamma that was preached by the Buddha to put you on the path of Nibbana can actually put you out of Nibbana if you're not careful. On one occasion, the Buddha says the Dhamma is like a serpent or a snake. If you have ever caught a snake, you must be careful where you catch it. So there's only one safe place to catch a snake, and that is just beneath its head. If you catch it anywhere else, then of course you won't live to tell the tale. So if you want to be careful when you catch a snake, you need to catch it just under its head, and that's the only safe place to catch it. So similarly, when you take the Dhamma, you must be super focused and completely zoned in to your Nibbana. If you go and study the Dhamma for any other purpose, you will forget why you went to study the Dhamma in the first place. So be very careful about that. So not to make it an academic study, but to make it one that changes you from the inside. Right? So that's what I meant by you need to become incapable of the evil things that other people do. You need to be incapable of shouting back when someone shouts at you. You need to be incapable of hitting back when someone hits you. Right? So when someone curses you, you need to be incapable of shouting or cursing back at them. And the more incapable you become of them, the more capable you become in understanding the Dhamma. And that works both ways. The more capable you are in the Dhamma, the more incapable you become of retaliation. So it feeds each other. They feed each other. So that's a positive reinforcement. So we talked about that last week. And if you are able to break bad, then I said the next thing we need to do is to start to break good. We talked about guilt to some extent, and how some people feel guilty about their past, the things that they have done, the things that they have done but today they know they shouldn't have done, the things that were said that today they know they shouldn't have said, the things that they thought but today they know they shouldn't have spent time thinking. These are the regrets that we all have in life, being remorseful. So to help you break good is when I put forward the concept that you need to take a moment to stop the tape, rewind it, go back to the situation in which you found yourself doing, saying or thinking something which you are not proud of today, and then ask yourself, if you stop the tape and then go into the mind metaphorically, and then in the mind extract or draw out ignorance and attachment, come back out and now hit the play button again, would you have said, done or thought the very things that you did before having taken out ignorance and attachment? So we did that a few times with a number of examples, and I also asked you to try it out during the week. So this is something that we'll be doing practically in next week's meditation program also. We'll spend some time doing that. I'll ask you to go into your mental bank, your memories of the things that have happened in your life, things that you are not proud of today, things that you thought were perhaps done with good intention, but later on you realize, well, actually that was just desire all over. That was just anger and aversion. That was just such a huge ego that spoke. If you are able to, once you're able to spot these unfortunate events in your life, you are now able to analyze them. This is where you need to do your autopsies. Get in there and find and dig out that which is truly responsible. That which is truly responsible for your actions. And you need to be able to realize and identify ignorance and attachment being the problem here. Because after all, the same ignorance and attachment, if were present in someone else, in some other mind, then they would probably have conducted themselves in exactly the same way. So it's like if you were to transplant your ignorance at any given moment in time. Just think about, say you like to eat ice cream. With an ice cream in your hand and you're looking at it and you just want to lap it up. Now pause the tape, go into your mind, pull out ignorance and attachment, and now do an ignorance and attachment transplant to someone else and give the ice cream to their hand and see what happens. How you feel is exactly how they will feel at that point in time. So, but then again, now you with no ignorance and attachment, unless you are hungry, there is no reason why you would be eating that ice cream. So you'd probably put that away. But then, stop the tape again, take back what was yours, ignorance and attachment, put it back in your mind, and then hit the play button again. And once again, you're back to your old self. So, having done this a few times, it has to become obvious to us that there really is no doer here. I mean, in the ultimate sense, in real terms, it makes little sense really to incarcerate someone, to put someone in prison. Because after all, what's being put in prison is the body of the person, when it's actually not the body that's done the bad deed. It's the mind that has offended. But there's no way you can imprison the mind. Well, the mind is imprisoned already through ignorance and attachment, but as a form of punishment to be inflicted by someone else, there's no form of punishment that can be exerted on the mind. Which is ironical. Just because we can't punish the mind, we punish someone else or something else. Which seems unfair in some senses, but that's the way the world is, because people believe that it's people who wrong. And on the other side, we believe that it's people who are good and it's people who are bad. Individuals. When after all, these are attributes of the mind, these are characteristics of the mind that are in play here. I'll give you a really simple analogy, see if you can relate to this. Let's say you bought yourself a new shirt, and having worn this shirt, today you go to the temple. So you go to the temple, you offer flowers, you light the candles or the lamps, and you worship the Buddha. You perhaps even offer alms to the monks. You sweep the temple premises. So you've done a lot of meritorious deeds, and you've acquired a lot of merit. And the people that know that you've been there, you've been to the temple, the people that you meet when you get back home, as well as the monk who you met at the temple, said, you know, what a good guy you are, what a good person you are, to have done so much good to others. So they'll say you're a very good person. I remember you went into the temple wearing this new shirt. Now you come back home, and the following day you wear the same shirt and you go clubbing. You go clubbing, and then you have a little bit too much to drink, and you get up to some mischief, and then you get caught, and you have to spend the night behind bars, and you are of course then admonished for your bad behavior by the police, various other authorities, as well as the people that you have caused harm and damage to, and eventually you get back home, and then of course you also meet your family and they also rebuke you for your bad behavior. Now, you wore the same shirt that you wore yesterday to the temple. Today you wore it, or the following day you wore it to the club, and you got up to mischief. What would you say if I took the shirt and put it in prison? Or what would you say if I took the shirt that belonged to you and really sung praises about it because it was worn to the temple? It was worn to the temple, it was worn when flowers were offered to the Buddha, it was worn when the Buddha was worshipped, it was worn when you were doing good to other people. So shall I sing praises about the shirt? Shall I say how good and kind and generous the shirt was? What about when you wore the shirt the following day and you got into trouble? Should I now find fault with the shirt? Should I now insult the shirt? Should I now admonish the shirt? Or this whatever item of clothing? Is it the shirt that's responsible? So when you wore to the temple, let's say you spilled some oil from the oil lamp on your sleeve, and so there's the mark of the oil of the oil on your sleeve. It's left a stain. That's your left sleeve. And then the following day you wore it to the club and you got some alcohol on your right sleeve. Which one's now the good sleeve? Which one's the bad sleeve? So clearly, I think it's obvious to you that the shirt really played a neutral role in this situation. The shirt should neither receive compliment nor blame for its involvement in the activities that were conducted by the person that wore the shirt. Hopefully you understand the analogy I'm using here. Of course, the shirt, if the shirt were able to observe what was going on, when the person that wore the shirt was receiving praise, the shirt observed this. Would it not be foolish for the shirt? Let's just imagine the shirt could actually think and act like a normal human being. It could think, it could hear. Right? So imagine the shirt is actually like if a shirt could talk, right? So that sort of thing. So the shirt, you just give life to the shirt, and now the shirt is observing how someone is standing in front of this person, and all the praise that comes towards the person. What if the shirt thought, yes, I did that, that was me. And the shirt actually thinks that some of that praise, or actually all of that, is deserved by the shirt. Do you think that would be reasonable? Or what if when the shirt is behind bars, because it's being worn by the person behind bars, now when they're being told off, when they're being admonished for their bad behavior, would it be reasonable for the shirt to take insult, to take the blame, to feel bad, to feel terrible about what happened? If the shirt could feel, I mean. Clearly not, because as you understand, the shirt is neither had no involvement really. There was no active involvement in either of these situations. He was not an accomplice in the crime, and he was not a companion in the meritorious deed. So in neither occasion did the shirt actually play an active role. Therefore the shirt is not deceiving, or rather deserving of praise or blame. You should now begin to understand a little bit how, in the face of the vicissitudes of life, an arahant remains unshaken. See if you can connect the analogy. I'm giving you time to connect the analogy, because it's when you think for yourself, that's when the faculty of wisdom can be cultivated. I shouldn't be thinking on your behalf. You should think for yourself. But I'm helping you out here. I'm giving you some help and support here. Try and think if you can connect the analogy. We know the vicissitudes of life: praise and blame, loss and gain, fame and defame. Right? So the vicissitudes of life, when they come to individuals, the more one progresses in the Dhamma, the less they become fluttered or flustered in the face of these vicissitudes. They remain unshaken. So an Arahant is completely unshaken, whether it's praise or blame, whether it's a compliment or an insult, whether it's a loss or profit. An Arahant remains unshaken. See if you can connect the nature of an Arahant, the mind of an Arahant, to the analogy that I have offered you here with the shirt. If the shirt is intelligent enough, if the shirt was wise enough, and of course we are talking about a shirt that can think here, just to help you get the idea. If the shirt was an animate being or an entity, it would be unreasonable for the shirt to be both taking responsibility for the offense and also taking credit for good behavior, because the shirt is not responsible and the shirt did nothing in terms of getting involved in that. It was just present. It was just present when both deeds happened. So see, likewise, what I want you to start to think now is in terms of, if there's guilt that still lingers in your mind because of the things that were done in the past, again, if you pay attention, you'll see my choice of words to help you understand the concept I'm trying to get across to you here. The things that were done rather than the things that you did. The things that were done. Because when you start to look at cause and effect, which is the doctrine of the Buddha, you begin to see that this is a pretty passive process. There's no doer here. But as we talked about once in the past, in a worldly existence, talking in the passive sense or in the passive tense is something that is very frowned upon. It's looked down upon. Even in school, you are taught to use more active forms of sentences than the passive. So much so that if you use a word processor like Microsoft Word, if you type a sentence out in passive form, it will put a little green wavy line under it to say, please reconsider your grammar, this is a passive sense. Because when there's the notion of a self and everything is fathomed, everything is measured in relation to the self, whereas the self is the center point, where the self is the baseline, and everything is X from the self, or Y from the self, or Z from the self, so it's a measurement from the self, then really nothing can be spoken of, nothing can be considered without reference to self. So actually self becomes the reference point. So when that happens, everything has to be something to me. Everything has to be something to me, or someone to me. So the whole world revolves around the me, or the I. And so this is why the passive is frowned upon and the active is what is condoned. So see if you can connect the analogy with the shirt. Can the shirt take any responsibility for either the good deed or the misdeed? Clearly not. Likewise, when you are in the face of blame, or when there is blame coming your way, or when there's perhaps, it could be self-blame. This is what we call guilt. When there's guilt that comes your way, or when there's an admonition that comes from somebody else towards you, what I asked you to do last week is to take a moment to ask yourself, was it actually me that's is it actually me that's responsible for this, or is it the ignorance and attachment that hijacked my mind at that time that's responsible for this? Now clearly the reason we do this is not to use that as an alibi to put a case forward to say, well, mister, it wasn't really me, it was I and A, ignorance and attachment. You can't use that as an alibi, because it's meaningless. I mean, just think about it, right? The Buddha, after all, was one who understands this best. But when there were occasions where the members of the Sangha misconducted themselves, then he would summon them and he would admonish them. Now can you imagine when the Buddha is telling someone off for something that they've done, one of the monks say, well, Buddha, it's not really me, it was ignorance and attachment that did it. You can imagine what the Buddha's next words might have been. Yeah, had that happened, but I doubt that they would have ever done that. But clearly, the Buddha knows perfectly that it's not the person that stood in front of me that's responsible for what happened. It's the ignorance and attachment that was in the mind that's responsible. But of course, the admonition is delivered to the individual. I like for you to try and think of this in terms of, if you can just use your vivid imagination here, okay? Now it may be that you don't believe in spirits, and that's fine. By the way, I don't mean spirits in bottles. I mean like real spirits, like ghosts and things like that. Spirits, right? Spirits that the eye can't see. So use your vivid imagination to think about a spirit. And this spirit, then the name of the spirit is kindness. That's the name of the spirit. Then there's another spirit, and its name is anger. Okay, so there are two spirits. One's called kindness, the other's called anger. So clearly you can't see them. As a spirit, you normally are not able to see. But just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. So if you don't believe in this stuff, I'm just asking you to just so you understand what I'm trying to give you here as an example, just go with the flow. Okay, you don't have to convert yourself. Oh, no, I don't believe in spirits. It's fine. I'm not asking you to start to believe in spirits. I'm just saying follow the example here. Okay, so let's say there are two spirits. One's called kindness, the other's called anger. And from what we know about spirits, they can possess people. Okay, so imagine one fine day you are just walking along the road and you see a beggar. So this is just an event that's happening in front of you. There's no subjectivity here. It's just an objective event. There's a beggar. So how do you know it's a beggar? Because he's on the street. He has the appearance of a beggar, and we know that when that sort of person in that sort of dress in that sort of way, in that sort of posture, is probably a beggar. Or let's say that he's got a board that says, "I'm a beggar." Okay. So now, at this moment, one of these two spirits can possess you. Now, if the spirit by the name of generosity possesses you, or kindness possesses you, your next action is determined by the spirit. Clearly, when someone's possessed, their actions are driven by the mind of the spirit. Okay, that's the way it works. You might have seen some of these things where they try to ward off evil spirits, and some people, they get possessed by evil spirits. When they are possessed, then their conduct is very different to how they would normally behave. If you just when you got a moment, not now, just go on YouTube and type in possessed by spirits or something, and you'll see various people whose behaviors are entirely different. Sometimes their normal behavior is to stand up on their 2 feet and walk around and talk and just act normally. But the moment they get possessed by a spirit, now they'll sometimes drop on all fours, and now they'll start to eat off the floor, and their behavior is going to be very different. It'll not resemble anything to the person that was. It'll be completely different, because what you're now seeing is the nature of the spirit through the body of this person. So the body has not changed. The body is the same. It's the same person physically, but the mind now, or the software, as we used that analogy last week, the software of this hardware has now changed. So the software, the driving force, the mind of this person is now the spirit. So the original mind of the person has been suppressed, and over on top of that, the spirit has now possessed the mind of this person, right? So I am assuming that most of you will have seen such possessions happen. Now, anything that this person does when possessed, would you say is reasonable for us to attribute to the original person? Let's say this person, having been possessed, goes and kills someone. When they become unpossessed, so when they go back to their normal state, when they have been unpossessed, would you think it's reasonable for us to inflict punishment on the person whose body belongs to, or to the person to whom the body belongs to, when in fact their actions were driven by the mind of the spirit and not the person? So as no is the answer, by which you would mean that no, Swami, no answer, we shouldn't be inflicting punishment on the person to whom the body belongs to, because after all it's not the body that was the driving force behind the action. It was the mind, and the mind was not of the person. Their mind was suppressed, and what was the overpowering force there was actually the mind of the spirit. So really the spirit, if anything, should be punished. And that is how it normally works anyway, right? So even if you perform a karma, say a bad deed, when you are possessed, then you do not receive any punishment for that. So there are no vipakas for karmas committed by you when you are possessed by someone or a spirit. So even if you were to kill your mother when you are obsessed by an evil spirit, then that is not an anantariya papa karma, and it's not even a papa karma. So you are not responsible for that. And the reason for that is because, remember in the Upali Sutta, which we can refer back to, the Buddha proves to Upali that mental volition is the more powerful of verbal and physical action. So mental action, mental volition is the driving force. So that which draws consequences is the mental force, right? So therefore then, when you are possessed, you can't be responsible for your actions. Now let's say, as I said, you see the beggar on the street, and kindness is the spirit that possessed you. How do you think you're going to act in that moment? Really, is that you acting, or is that your body that's simply following the orders of the spirit that you have just possessed? Or rather, they have possessed your body, right? So really what's happening is the orders are coming from a different command and control center, which is the mind of the spirit, and it's simply your body that is now acting according to the instructions of that mind. So if it's the kindness spirit that has possessed you now, then chances are, as you walk by them, you might stop, you might sympathize or empathize with them, and you might even offer to them the lunch that you had packed for yourself. So that's the kindness spirit. But what if, instead of the kindness spirit, the anger spirit possessed you at that point in time? Now how might you conduct yourself? So now as you walk up to the person, you might look at them and give them a vile look, frown at them, and even curse them, because you're now angry. You're angry, and you might even say, why do you come in front of me on a fine, beautiful day like this and completely ruin my entire day? You might even say something like that. You might say something in passing to hurt their feelings, because now you have been possessed by the anger spirit. So you see then, is it you that's really doing this? I'll agree for now. I'll accept for now that it's your body and it's your voice and all that. Right? Let's keep that for the time being. But mentally, where are these instructions coming from? Where are these commands and controls coming from? They're coming from the mind of the spirit. Either way, either the kindness spirit or it's coming from the evil spirit, either the good one or the bad one. So really, the driver of this vehicle, so who's at the driving seat, is the spirit. Now tell me then, having offered your lunch to this poor beggar, you move forward a few steps and then you meet someone, or someone spotted you doing this, and they walk up to you and say, hey, mister, I just saw you giving your lunch away to that beggar, and I thought that was really, really, really kind of you. It was so nice of you to do that. I really wanted to compliment you and felicitate you for your great and behavior. Tell me now, are you able to take these compliments for yourself? Are you deserving of the credit that has just been passed on to you? This credit which has just been bestowed upon you, are you deserving of that credit? Or really, is it the kindness spirit that is deserving of this credit? It's your body, yes, I get that. It was your voice, yes, I get that. Okay, let's work with that for the time being. We'll further analyze it in future sermons, but for the time being, let's just work with that. But your intention there, to be kind to this person, was not your own, was it? The driver of this vehicle, who was sat behind the steering wheel, was actually the kindness spirit. So therefore, when someone walks up to you and say, that was so nice of you, I wish more people were like you, that was so nice of you, and then they sing your praises. If you really understand what's going on here, how cause and effect is what's going on here, right? And how this is simply a process that's happening, would you now be able to take the compliment personally? Do you think now you're deserving of that credit? How about when the anger spirit possessed you, and then you passed some as you passed the beggar, you spoke some harsh words at him, and you insulted him, and maybe even spat in his face, depending on how possessed and or the severity of the anger. Okay, so there are various spirits in that spirit world, anger spirits. So there are the lieutenants, and then there are the brigadiers, and yes, and so forth. So if it was a higher ranking spirit, if you like, from the anger spirit world, please understand I'm using a metaphor here. It was a higher ranking spirit from the anger world that possessed you, and now your conduct towards this beggar was one that was very evil, expressing of a lot of anger, ill will and hatred. And then as you walked forward, you were also met by another person, and then they spoke in a very unapproving way of what you have done, clearly, because your actions were evil. or disapproving way of what you have done, and they tell you off for what you have done, and say things like, how could you have done something like that? That was terrible of you. Poor beggar, why did you do like that? You should learn to be more kind to people. He did nothing wrong to you. How could you have done something like that? Now tell me, do you deserve these insults, the blame that is coming your way? And by the way, as a side note, what I'm trying to explain to you here is toxic to you if you haven't broken bad yet. If you are still a bad person within inverted commas, then this is toxic to you, because what will happen is you will now use this as your weapon to guard yourself and use it as an alibi whenever you conduct yourself in an evil way. So as I said, this is for people who are ready to break good. This is not for people who are still trying to break bad. Okay, so this is toxic to you. I warn you, this is toxic to you if you are not ready to break good. If you're still if a lot of your behaviors are bad and evil and harmful to others, then you're not ready for this yet. But I believe I'm speaking to people who have been listening to these sermons for a long time and who have started to make changes, real changes in their life. Okay, so when you're listening to this person that's telling you off, I'm asking you the question: do you think you are deserving of this insult that's coming your way? Because after all, yes, of course it was your body, I get that. It was your voice that was used to blame this person, I get that. But the driving force behind all of this was the spirit, was it not? So if it was the spirit, then it's the spirit that's responsible for your actions here, not you. Clearly, if the spirit had unpossessed you, then yes, maybe you are responsible. But that's not what happened. You were possessed by the spirit, both the kindness spirit in the previous occasion, and then on this occasion the anger spirit. In either situation, as you'll understand, it's unreasonable both for you to take credit and blame, because neither of these two actions was of your making. You were simply following orders. Really, actually, you didn't have any choice there. You weren't really following orders as such. You simply gave up the use of your body to the spirit, and then having possessed that body, all of the actions from that point forward were that of the spirit. So essentially, you're like a robot being driven by the spirit. Now, if you understand this analogy, okay, so hopefully you've gotten it, the analogy. What I'm asking you to do now is to relate that to how you conduct yourself when the vicissitudes of life come your way. And also, for example, when you feel guilt. Or, for instance, when you see acts of kindness. Where? Within yourself, not anywhere else. Because sometimes, we feel that we are nice people, don't we? We feel that we are very good people. We are very kind and nice people, and that we are very deserving of other people's praise. And that we're this is as good as it comes. Doesn't get any much better than this. When we think about ourselves, does it come any better than you? Clearly not. You're the best there ever made, and there's not going to be a better version of human being than you. This is sometimes how we might feel about ourselves. The holier than thou. And then on the other hand, when we have done misdeeds and we feel remorseful about the things we've done, then we feel so terrible. It's a real downer. We feel really bad. And then we feel, how could I have done something like that? I'm terrible. And then we self-mortify ourselves. So it's a case of celebration when we feel that we've done something good and that we are good people. I'm a nice person, I'm a good person, I'm a very kind person, I'm a very generous person. Look what I've done. I worship the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha every day. I worship my parents every day. I do everything that Swamin Wahanse says, so I must be a really good person. Right, again, I. And then if it's something bad that's happened, then, I'm a terrible person, look what I've done. I still can't give up my ice cream or my cookies or my grandfather clock or whatever. And then you feel bad about yourself. Again, it's I. So you see, you're both taking credit when you think good about yourself, and you're taking blame when you think bad about yourself. But is that really you that's doing any of these things? Are you deserving of either credit or blame? I repeat, this is toxic for you if you haven't broken bad yet. You might as well just plug your fingers in your ears and not listen to the rest of this. I'm trying to help you break good. Because after all, there really isn't an I to be good. There isn't an I to be bad. This is simply a process. As much as a car, let's say that's a car that's broken down on the street and it's fuming, you're not going to go and take a stick and thrash the car and kind of say, how dare you break down on me like that just when I was about to go somewhere important? How could you be like that to me? How many years have I looked after you and washed you and fed you, and how could you do something like that to me? I mean, you wouldn't do that to your car, would you? Because you understand that the car's broken down because there's something faulty in the process. The running of the car, there's something wrong in the mechanics of the car. So it's the faulty component or the faulty process that needs to be rectified or replaced. You understand that is comprehensible. But the problem is, when we think about ourselves and when we think about others, sentient beings if you like, we find it difficult to think of it in terms of cause and effect. We find it difficult to think of it in terms of a series of events that unfolds one after the other. Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, repeat. So it's a process that's running. So during this process, at various points, both good and bad enter this process. You can think of it in terms of those spirits. So the mind, as this mental process runs, the spirits, sometimes it's kindness, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's desire, sometimes it's ego. These are spirits. Sometimes it's greed, sometimes jealousy, sometimes lazy. These are all spirits. And when these spirits possess the mind, now what we can observe, so as a bystander, what we observe is the manifestation of that spirit. So, something you might be thinking about right now is, but Swaminathan, we see kind people. I mean, just the other day I needed some help and someone, without even asking them, they came and helped me. So aren't there kind people? Aren't there kind and good people? I mean, even just last week we spoke about taxi drivers and how good they are and the good things that they do and how many lives that they might be saving on a daily basis. So aren't they good people? My point there being, are there people to be good or bad? Because remember, going back to the previous sermons, who's on the chair? You remember from that sermon, we analyzed what we observed. Through our eyes, we saw what looked like a person. But then we analyzed it. We asked ourselves, I'm seeing the body of a person. There's the face, there's the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, as if they're sticking their tongue out. Their arms and legs and the rest of the body, the torso, right? So yes, we're seeing all the parts of the body. Is that the person? Is that who I think this person is? Then what if they lost one of their limbs? Would they be less of a person? So then remember, we came to the conclusion that no, this is not the person. This is just the body that of who I think is a person. It's the body. And then for the time being, we said, let's attribute this personality thing to the mind. Let's just say that the mind is the person. We didn't take it any further on that occasion. So we agreed that it wasn't the body that was the person. We said, let's just think of it in terms of the person is using the body to achieve the things that it wants. So when the person wants to go see something, it will send an order to the legs, to the knees, stretch, and the knees stretch, and now the legs are extended. And it will send an instruction to the arms, say push, and then it will push, and then once you've done that, you are now stood. Again, I'm using my words very carefully here. I didn't say you're standing, I'm saying you're stood. And then another signal goes to your muscles of your legs. Contract. And then extend. Contract. Extend. Contract. Extend. And so on. So, repeat. And then after several iterations of this, the longitude and latitude of this body has changed. It's not where it was before. The bystander will look at this and say, this person walked. But really what's happening is a series of causes and events. You can break it down into discrete events. A thought in the thought process, an individual thought is capable of doing a unit of action. And then the next thought comes along when this one passes away, and that's capable of achieving a unit of action. And then the next thought will come along in this series of thoughts, and that is capable of a unit of action. Now extrapolate this, and over time, to the bystander it looks like the person has walked. But really, if you break it down, this is almost like quantum physics. If you break it down, you're beginning to see discrete events taking place. Each thought that arises, each consciousness, so each mind moment, if you like, each mind moment is able to achieve a unit of work. Imagine if you were to measure it in joules, right? Let's say the mind is able to achieve a joule of work. So joules being the unit of measurement of energy. So if it was able to achieve a joule of work, then if you wanted to move from one place to the other, now you can calculate the amount of joules you require, and then by that you can actually work out how many chittas you will need if you work your way back. So each of those chittas will now have a very specific purpose, and that is to exert X amount of joules, one joule, if you like, towards those muscles. It will contract and expand, contract and expand, contract and expand. If it's 10 joules, do that 10 times, and now you've just done it 10 times. That's all. In real terms, that's all that's happened. It's happened 10 times. And just think about, I'll give you another analogy. Say you were saving up for something, right? when you had a jar, do you still have that anger jar, by the way? What happened to that? Oh, you put in a fixed deposit now, right? Good. You've collected so much. Excellent. So the anger jar, right? So when you put in your pennies, let's say, of course we know that 100 pennies make up a pound. Now, as you add each penny to your jar, okay, do any of these pennies know that the reason that they're being collected is so that a pound can be made up? Now the pennies are indifferent to this. They don't know anything about that. They don't know that there's another penny next to it. They don't know what it's for. The penny is just there. But as you start adding up the pennies, right, 1 penny, 2 pennies, 3 pennies, 4 pennies, and you keep adding on these pennies, and if it's 1 penny a day, then when 100 days have lapsed, now still when you look at the bottle, do you see a pound? Like all those pennies have somehow sort of morphed into each other, and all of a sudden they've been replaced by a single pound coin? Clearly not. But so is that not a pound? It's a pound. But is it a pound? It's not a pound. Are you confused, or are you confused? So you've taken the penny jar, your money bank, and you're adding a penny a day, 1 penny every day. At the end of 100 days, if I asked you how much money does it look like I've got in there, or say I reported it made a note of it on a piece of paper. Now clearly you can look at it and go, that's a pound in there. Would I not be within my rights to look at it and go, I can't see a pound in there? Because I can't see a pound. What I'm seeing is 100 pennies. And each of those pennies knows only of its own existence. It does not know about the 99 other pennies in the jar. But together they make up the pound. So this concept that I'm trying to get across to you is, I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but goes some way in trying to explain this concept through these analogies. So this is a process. So there are discrete events that take place, and then when you take a step back and you observe the whole rather than the individual bits that make it up, when you observe the whole thing, you can now use your imagination to say that's a pound there. Of course you need your imagination, because really you don't see a real pound there, because all you really see looking at are 100 pennies, but added up they make up a pound. But we know that there's such a thing as a pound coin, but what you're seeing there is not a pound, but rather what you're seeing there is 100 pennies. So you see, so likewise, when you talk about yourself or myself, I, and these terms that we use, and we talk about the mind or the I am. If you just take those two words, I am. So here we're talking about the presence of I. It's a feeling that I am present, and that's what we mean by I am. So when you say I am, if you break it down, where's the I that's am? If am, clearly I is the noun and am is the verb there, right? So I am means I am present. So I exist. This is me. But if you break the I down into its discrete components, so if you dig in deep, you will realize that this thing that we seem to be sensing as an I is after all individual chittas that arise and pass away, one after the other in sequence. And that's the process. And then as this process continues, now there are those spirits that are on the outskirts or on the outsides, and from time to time, because of the nature of the mind, they are attracted. Because of the characteristics the mind possesses at any given time, these spirits are attracted towards this mind. So at one point, the kindness spirit possesses the mind. And now what happens is, when you observe someone and say, well, he's a kind person, really, is it really the person that's kind, or is it the spirit that's possessed the person that is kind? Because what would happen if the spirit was unpossessed? So if the spirit left the mind, and now you're back to the original mind, is that a kind person any longer? So kindness is simply something that manifests. The thing is this though, because you can't see spirits, and that is why I use this analogy here. We can't see spirits to our naked eye. I don't know about you, but I can't. So to your naked eye, you can't see spirits. However, when they possess someone, now we can see the temperament of the spirit, the way they think, the way they act. Now you can see it, because now you have something you can look at. Because the body that they have possessed is visible, but the mind of the spirit is invisible. So even if the spirit had some kind of fine body, by fine body I don't mean like a fine body, I mean something that is so subtle, right? So if the spirit had a very subtle body that cannot be seen with the naked eye, then we wouldn't be using this metaphor here. But the reason I'm using this metaphor is when that spirit possesses this person, now this, just a sideline, the reason that spirits do this kind of thing is because they want to interact with the physical world. This is for those of you who believe in spirits. Because spirits want to really interact with the physical world, but they can't, because they can't touch things like you and I can, because their bodies are so subtle, they're so light and they're so fine, that they can't really interact physically with the physical world. So what they'll have to do is they'll have to possess a physical body, or a body who is more physical than their body, and now take control of it. Much the same way as say if you wanted to move Earth, as in not the planet Earth, if you wanted to move say a rock, a large rock. Now of course if you can't do it yourself, then you go and hire what do you call them, a bulldozer. So because you can't do what you want to do using your own arms and legs, you get into the body of a bulldozer, and that's not the dog, the machine. You get into the body of the bulldozer, and now you use the controls of the bulldozer to move the rocks. And by doing so, you are now able to achieve what you wanted. So you see, the spirits do something along the same lines. When they can't do what they want to do using their fine bodies, what they do is they take control over a more coarse body, something that is more tactile, more physical, that's got more mass, right? So they'll do that, and now they'll take control. But when it does so again go back to the bulldozer being driven by a driver. Would you attribute the actions of the bulldozer to the bulldozer, or would you attribute it to the driver of the bulldozer? Clearly you know the answer there. It's the driver. That's why in some countries, I don't know where, but in some countries when a car goes and hits somebody, apparently the fashion is everyone comes and hits the driver. It was a mistake, but they come and hit the driver, and then sometimes they break his legs. It was a mistake, but some countries that sort of thing happens. I don't know where, but it happens apparently. You see how wrong that is. It's both right and wrong, but it's in the context of what we are trying to talk about here. I mean, that seems a sensible thing to do, because what they don't do is they don't go and hit the vehicle. Sometimes they do that, but that's to punish the driver. So sometimes they actually set the vehicle on fire, but that's not to punish the vehicle, right? It's to punish the driver. They set the vehicle on fire. So anyway, coming back to the bulldozer, when the bulldozer has extended its arm and it's lifting up a rock, right? If it's, say, the wrong rock, it's lifted. You were supposed to lift the rock on the left, it's lifted the rock on the right. Now if you're the supervisor on the site or something, you're the one who wanted this job done, you don't go and stand in front of the bulldozer and tell it off. I say the driver's gone for lunch, right? You don't go and stand in front of the bulldozer and say, how dare you lift the wrong rock. That's not what I asked you to do. I asked you to lift the other rock. So you don't do that to the bulldozer. Why? Because the bulldozer is, it's just simply following orders and instructions. If you want to take it out, you're going to be taking it out on the driver, because it was the driver that was driving it and was powering. It was the driver that was giving it volition. It was the driver that was giving the intention of the movements, to the movements of the bulldozer. Now, much in the same way, folks, what I want you to understand is, when you look at yourself and the way you conduct yourself, either in the past or into the future, or in the way you're conducting yourself right now in this moment. For instance, sometimes I forgot to mention in today's sermon, like how you shouldn't be distracting yourself during the sermon. Let's say as you're listening to this sermon, one of you has got your phone in your hand and you're playing away some computer game, some game on your phone, right? Now, see, is that who do you attribute that to? When you know clearly well you shouldn't be doing that, but ignorance and attachment are so strong and so severe, right, that it's hijacked your system now. Like, if a computer got a computer bug, you don't crash the computer. You don't lift it up and bang it on the floor, because the computer is not responsible for the virus. Hopefully you're understanding what I'm trying to say here. I want you to start to think about yourself along those lines. Can you start to see yourself as a process rather than an entity? Can you start to see your mind as a process rather than an entity? You can if you tried. You could. And I'm trying to teach you how to do that. So when you experience someone's being kind to you, and by the way, as I said, you should always compliment someone if someone does something good to you. If you see kindness, you should always compliment that. But to compliment, if kindness was a spirit, unfortunately you can't give the compliment to the spirit because you can't see the spirit through your naked eye. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to compliment the person. But so you're looking at the person, but actually what you're doing is you're complimenting the spirit. Isn't that the case? You're looking at the person, but actually you're complimenting the spirit. So this is why, for those of you who are in work, will have learned, through your work and courses and things like that, that when you tell someone off, it's not the someone you should be telling off. You should be skilled enough to point your finger, or rather to direct your blame to the offending action, not the person. We've spoken about this a long time ago. How when you give feedback, you shouldn't be telling off the person, or you shouldn't be telling the person off, but rather you should be pointing out that it's their action that is not condoned, and how that is a constructive way to give feedback, rather than kind of completely destroying the person's personality and their mindset. What we are trying to do is we are trying to help them shed off the bad behavior, and it's easier to do that when they feel that you are on their side. So to do that, you need to be able to find the fault and pinpoint the fault on the error, not on them. It's the same concept. I've now further developed here to help you understand it more in terms of why an arahant is unshaken both in the face of blame and praise. Because an arahant fully understands that this is a process, that there is no I who is deserving of credit, and there is no I who is deserving of blame. So when blame comes their way, let's say, because an arahant can make a mistake, not intentionally, but mistakes can happen, like off the cuff, right? Something happens. It was not intentional, but it can happen. Only a Buddha makes no mistakes, either intentionally or unintentionally. But for an arahant, mistakes can happen, but they don't do it intentionally. So they won't make a mistake knowing it's a mistake. Okay? So let's say a mistake has happened. Let's say as they're walking, their robe has come loose and they haven't realized it. So now someone comes up to them and then they start telling him off. Look at the way you're walking. Is that how you're supposed to be? Why can't you make sure you've donned your robes probably? Correctly. You're dragging your robe along the flow, along the ground, right? It's getting dirty, and then they start telling off. Now an arahant, because he understands completely, 100%, that there is neither me nor the person that's actually giving this instruction. Actually, for this, the outside person is unnecessary for this sort of contemplation. An arahant knows fully well that within himself it's just a process. So there's a body, and then there's a mind there's a series of thoughts which come in sequence, one after the other, and the error was not in himself as such, but the error was in the error. The error is the error. It's not the person. So they're able to attribute the blame correctly. So it's not like in the face of blame an arahant is indifferent. That's not what happens here. It's not like an arahant just doesn't care about what anyone says. That's not the way an arahant is. They care very deeply about what someone says, and what they're trying to say and what is being expressed here. So it's not that they have a carefree attitude towards everything. That's not the way they are. But what they understand is This is a process that's running here. So really, when someone's giving me some feedback, what they're trying to point out is the flaw in the process. They're pointing out the problem in the process. So what they do now is they go and fix the process. If anything, they're glad and grateful that you help them to find the flaw in the process. I mean, imagine you had some kind of production line. Okay, if you were in the manufacturing business, for instance, you had a production line, and there was something wrong with the production line. You weren't getting the goods that you expected. I mean, would you not even consult someone? You might even hire consultants to come and examine your process and try and find out where the error is in the process. So when they give you feedback and they say, well, here's our report and here's where the process is, do you turn around and say, how dare you? Why did you get them in the first place? Because you know and you see and you accept, you welcome them, you embrace their feedback, because you understand that this feedback is about a problem in the process, not about you. So now what you do is you take on board that feedback, and now you go and fix the process, in the hope that once you've done that, the production of whatever it is you're producing, or your production line capacity or efficiency or whatever, all that improves, and the whole problem's gone. And you will even pay money for that. So how about if you can think about the way you operate as a process, and then when someone points out something wrong, if you're able to see it the way I'm trying to show it to you here, you will become incapable of being offended. Not you'll try and make your mind up when someone's offending you, because there is no someone to be offending you. There's no someone and there's no you either. What there is, though, is a process. So it's like one process is helping another process. So then any feedback you are able to receive gratefully, because what feedback is coming your way is help and support to rectify an error in the process. I mean, just think about it, right? If someone tells you something and it hurts your feelings, does it matter if what they're saying is true or not? Your feelings have been hurt. So does that not tell you that there's a problem anyway? I'll repeat, just try and see if you can understand this. Say someone's accusing you of something you've never done. You've not done that, right? So it's a false accusation. Factually, it's a false accusation. Fair enough. But as they make that accusation, it hurts your feelings. Just think about what your reaction should be now. Should it be, how dare you say something like that to me? I never did that. Or, regardless of what the accusation is, have they not just pointed out, have they not just given you an opportunity to identify a problem with the process, whether or not it's the fault that they're pointing out? So regardless of whether what they're saying is factually true or not, should you not be embracing the opportunity that they have given you? But you can only do it if you're able to see this as a process. Because if you personify this, if you take this process as a person, if you personify it, now you'll see that as an insult. And when there's insult, there'll be counter insults. This is why an arahant is incapable of insulting someone. Why? Because they're incapable of being insulted. If you can begin to see yourself as a process, folks, I tell you, that'll take you a long way. It'll move you leagues forward. If you're able to see yourself as a process. And I don't expect you to see you to understand every word of what I've just said, word for word. I don't expect you to do that. And if you don't, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Because if you're worrying again, there's another problem. That's also because you have personified it. You should simply see a process. That's like, say you had some kind of process, and you need to fix a motor to your process, and the motor that it can absorb for the time being is only so many watts, right? And then I bring a bigger motor and I say, right, let's fix this. Now, if you can't fix that motor there because it's just too powerful, does the process cry and weep about it? Because if we actually did fit that motor, it's only going to break the system. It's going to break the process down. Again, it's just cause and effect. So when one day there will be sufficient causes, you will understand what I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to explain to you. So the reason you're not understanding, if you are not understanding what I'm trying to explain to you here, is because not that you are stupid. If you take that you are stupid, then yes, you are stupid. I mean, that is what stupidity is. To think that one is stupid is stupidity. I really hope I'm not hurting anyone's feelings here. That is not my intention. I'm trying to explain something so deep and profound. I hope this is just not like, washing over your heads, and there's some of you who are able to understand the weight of what I'm trying to get across to you here. I know it's a little bit heavy, but I know that when you understand what I'm trying to explain to you, you will move forward leaps. So I want to try and explain this to you, and that's what I'm saying. It's fine if we have to talk about this for the next year before you understand it. The whole of next year we talk about this and this alone. That's fine, because after all, we'll keep tinkering the process, fine tune it, just make small adjustments at a time, one step at a time. That's why I tell you, go back and listen to the sermons, because when you do listen to the sermons, the old sermons, previous sermons, you'll always understand it better the second time you listen to it. I guarantee that. I vouch for that. Believe you me, folks, I listen to my own sermons. Because after all, there's not a me who's doing this sermon. I go back and listen to these sermons because as I'm saying this, it's coming into my mind for the first time. But so once I've said it once, now I know what I have said. So now when I go back and listen to it, I'm listening to the original. So so sort of the first half of this sermon. See, the first half of this sermon, when I was giving the first half of this sermon, I didn't know the second half of this sermon, did I? None of those things came into my mind, because it works in sequence. One after the other, after the other, after the other. That's how it works. So the things that I'm speaking to you now, I didn't come planned to give this lecture to you. This is what came to my mind now, at this moment in time. It's just cause and effect now. So these causes were not available when I gave the first half of this sermon. But now that I've given this sermon, now I know the stuff that I know now. So when I go back and listen to the sermon a second time, I listen to the first half of it knowing the stuff I know now. So therefore, it makes more sense to me. The things that I said make more sense to me the second time I listen to it. The reason for that is because it's not me who's doing the sermon. I know that sounds so wrong. That's because your frame of mind is wrong. After all, this is also a process. So this is the process of our collective merit. Remember at the beginning of the sermon, we all made a firm resolve, right? May all the merits that we've all done throughout samsara help us to listen to this sermon, understand, comprehend it, and attain the bliss of Nibbana. So our collective merit is pulling these words from somewhere, or these ideas from somewhere, and through this body. So it's not me per se. Through this body, through this voice box, these words are coming out. This is a process. I want you to start seeing yourself as a process. I want you to become incapable of being insulted. Then you'll become incapable of insulting someone. If you become incapable of being hurt, you'll become incapable of hurting. That's why I said incapable is the new capable. So, I don't want to give more right now, but let me bring what we were talking about to a graceful conclusion. We talked about I said, what if you were to ask Swaminatha, but there are kind people out there. Are you saying that there aren't any kind and nice, good people? I'm saying what you're observing is the manifestation of kindness. It's the visual form of kindness. That's what you're observing. So are there bad people? Are there evil people? What you're observing is the manifestation of evil. So the words, actions and thoughts. So words, of course, you can hear, actions you can see, thoughts, when they're converted to words and actions, now you can sense. Yeah. So this is the way you would observe someone. So these are, what you're observing are manifestations of those characteristics. After all, this is why someone can change. How does someone who was unkind in their younger years change, and then they become the kindest person known to humanity later on in their life? How does that happen? Well, the way it happens is unkindness, which was the spirit that possessed this mind, now leaves, and the kindness spirit now takes possession. So really, where's the kind person? Can you label what you're seeing, what you're observing, the body that you're seeing? Can you label that as being kind, or really is it simply not that the body, the voice, as well as the mind of the person that you're observing right now simply being a vehicle for the manifestation of kindness, or vileness, or wickedness, or generosity, or charity, or benevolence, or malevolence? These are all manifestations that you are able to observe. If you begin to look at yourself as a process, do what you can. I'm not saying you should all be capable of doing it to X degree. That's not the way it works anyway, because again, this is a system. This is a process. All processes have to be fine-tuned. One step at a time. There's no rush. Remember I told you last week, we don't need to be hasty, we just need to be heedful. To be hasty is to have undue amounts of eagerness. That's not necessary, and it's not conducive to one's practice. To be heedful is to have the necessary amounts of eagerness. You have to be heedful, not hasty. There's no rush, but at the same time we need to make progress. One of the other reasons you may not be able to understand, if you are not understanding what I'm saying to you right now, is because you are not following the sermons. If you don't follow the sermons regularly, and on some occasions, particularly I ask you to go back and listen to those sermons a second time, a third time. If you don't do that, then you won't be able to understand it. I mean, when I listen to my own sermons a second time, come on. Because after all, the Dhamma is the teacher. I am not the teacher. That this idea of Swamin Wahanse is the teacher, that is, from a conventional sense it may be true, but from an ultimate sense it's not true. The Dhamma is the teacher. It's our combined merit that is manifesting through this body right now. See, it comes to a point where you can actually talk about yourself in the third person. You can talk about yourself in the passive sense. You can talk about I without I. If you're not doing your 15 minutes, these will be some of the reasons why you don't understand the sermons. Am I saying this because I want to make you feel bad? Please don't think that way, because that would be foolish. I'm saying these things because I want you to understand these sermons, because then you will be able to experience the bliss that I'm experiencing day by day. I want to become incapable of being insulted. And when that day comes, I will be incapable of insulting someone. I mean, isn't that the best thing I can do for you and everyone else? Isn't this, after all, I look after myself for you? See, all the things we've talked about in the past, they're all interconnected. Are you seeing these connections as I do? If you keep in touch with the sermons, if you keep going back and listening to the previous sermons, then you'll be able to draw these connections. And these connections are so powerful, I tell you. You need to be able to link these things. That's when the circuit, parts of the circuit come alive. When this connects to that and that connects to this, and all the cogs start to all the wheels of the cog, they all start to line up with each other. And then when you turn one, everything else starts to turn slowly. That's how this works, because after all, it's a process. There's no me or you who's understanding the Dhamma. This is the process. So if you're not doing these things, then there's your diagnosis. Unfortunately, I can't be responsible for that. If what I'm trying to explain to you is incorrect, I will take responsibility for that. But there's always the case there, at the end of a sermon, there will be someone who's really understood it. There will be others who haven't understood it. There will be others who will just fallen asleep. Why? Process. Problems in the process. Some will not have had enough merit, so they need to engage in more merits. Others will not have been following up on the sermons, or doing their meditations, doing the things that we've been asking to do, sticking to a plan, coming up with a timetable, putting time aside, and stop wasting time. Stop putting time aside for indulgences in sensuality, and do what you just need to do to get by, and the rest of your time try and invest as much of that into your Nibbana. Nibbana can't be, let's attain some Nibbana while we are at it. You can't have that sort of attitude towards Nibbana. If you are serious about Nibbana has to become the key aim of your life, and then everything else is simply on the periphery to help you, to help support you towards that goal. And that's not me saying if you're a lay person you can't attain Nibbana. That's a misunderstanding, and a complete and utter misunderstanding. I'll be the first to admit, if you can come into robes, then the environment is 100,000 times more conducive to one's salvation. But it makes no difference if you're doing the same things, either as a lay person or as a monk. Then, of course I can't take any responsibility. No one can, because after all it's a process. If you want a different result at the end of the process, then the process has to be improved and refined. You don't make any changes to a process. 10 years time from today, what changes can you expect in the result? Answer is none. Why? No changes were made to the process. Who didn't make the changes? Wrong question. Changes were not made to the process. If you don't set your sails right, you're going to end up where you don't want to end up. It applies in lay life as much as your spiritual life. If you don't plan your life correctly, you will end up driving what you don't want to drive. You'll end up living where you don't want to live. You'll end up working where you don't want to work. You'll end up with someone you don't want to end up with. Well, these things apply both in your lay lives as much as in your spiritual lives. After all, we all have the same time, 24 hours a day. I don't have any more than you do. You don't have any less than I do. We all have the same time. Where we all differ is what we choose to do with our time. That is how we are all so different from each other. And whose fault is that? Mine? After all, you're choosing to choose your time, spend your time that way. Yes, I do talk about time quite a lot, and the importance of it. That's because whether you're ready or not, time's ticking by. I know sometimes these sermons might come across as being very stern and sound like I'm telling you off. Please do understand that this is because I care. For you to be sat down in front of a computer, to be watching at a screen with some changing images, and try to imagine the Swami Nuhase giving the sermon, that's a huge commitment on your part. That I get. I understand that. You don't know what he looks like. Most of you don't. Only those who've come along to the monastery can actually at least imagine. Others don't even know whether he's got his head backwards. For all you know, right? Who knows? So for those efforts you make to listen to the sermons, to engage, I want to give you the reward for that. So this is why I try to encourage you and try to help you walk the path. But unfortunately, I can't walk the path for you. I can only encourage you. I can only guide you. I can't push you. You're going to have to work by yourself. After everything's said and done, we'll be able to see who's walked and who's not. But then it will be too late for those who haven't. It will be too late for those who haven't bothered. I'm hoping none of you will be among them, because then regret will be too unbearable, I tell you. That regret it's a very nasty feeling, that regret. We've all experienced that in our lives, right? We all have. Right? Regret is a very, very uncomfortable feeling. It really boils you up from inside. I'm telling you, those of you who will not be investing time and energy towards your salvation, one day I just hope you won't find yourself in a situation where all of the other Kalyana Mitras who are with you, they've all done their job, they all go away, they've all attained their salvation. That's it, they've done their job, and you're all left behind, scratching your heads wondering what happened to us. Then it'll be too late. And then you will feel regret. Unfortunately, the Kalyana Mitras won't be there to help you recover from that regret either. Then you'll be all alone by yourself. That's why, while we are in their presence, it's important that we put our full energy towards this. Let's not lose our focus. Let's not lose our purpose. So, of course, plan your lives around your duties and responsibilities, but please do make sure that you put enough time and energy towards your liberation. Because after all, no one else cares about it. No one else cares about it. This is probably the one thing that no one else cares about. Because there's nothing for anyone else to gain out of it. If you're a good cook, right, there'll be people who care about that. If you're a good mother, there'll be people who care about that. If you're a good worker, there'll be people who care about that. If you're a good laborer, there'll be people who care about that. If you're a good doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or an anesthetist, there'll be people who care about that. If you're a good rocket scientist, there'll be people who care about that. If you're someone who's really good at Nibbana, no one will care. And if you're someone who's not good at Nibbana, no one will care. But if you're not a good mother, people will care. If you're not a good father, if you're not a good doctor, if you're not good at what you do, in a worldly context, you will feel the pain because others will make it known to you. But if you don't care about your Nibbana, trust me, no one will care, no one will bother, no one will think about tapping you on the back and say, hello, I think you should be attaining your Nibbana. Because after all, it's a world of suppliers and consumers. Everyone else is there to exploit your vexation, and through your vexation they find means to achieve their satisfaction. Don't you fall for that. Don't fall for that. Help people as much as you can, of course, I'll be the first to admit that. I mean, after all, what am I doing right now? Help people as much as you possibly can. Share what you have. Tell them teach others what you know. Anything you know that can help people better their lives, teach them. Share it among everyone. Give as much as you possibly can. But don't lose your eyes from the prize. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't look away. You need to have your focus right. Because if you don't care about your Nibbana, trust me, nobody cares. Nobody cares. If you're attaining Nibbana, right, 99.999% of this world, global population, will only have bad things to say about that. If you're someone who's serious about Nibbana, there will be that tiny 0.0000000. At the end of the next sermon, I'll give you the one. There'll be that amount of people who will say, hey, I think you should work on your Nibbana. But the vast majority will actually like it. They'll actually like it if you don't care about your salvation. Because the longer you hang around, the more opportunities they have to exploit you. And they will stop at nothing to do that. You know the drill. Let's be honest, we weren't all born saints. So we know what we were like. Now we have changed. Our ways have changed. Now we're different, but we know what we were like. So now think about those who haven't changed. Now you know what they are like, because they are what you were like. What were you like? That's what they are like. That's why I always take a few moments to, as much as I possibly can, to give you some energy and some oomph, and to remind you, you need to do this, folks. You really, 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 really need to do this. I don't know for how long this lockdown business is going to be, right? So these sermons might be the only way we get to talk for the next 5 years. Who knows? You should not be saying, what? You should be saying, I'm not sure I'll be around for the next 5 years, Swami answered. That's what should be coming to your mind. Who cares if the lockdown is going to be for the next 5 years if you're not going to be alive tomorrow? Be heedful. Don't take your eyes off the prize. Okay, so I will again on this day also ask you to go back and listen to the sermon, because we did go into some depth and there were quite a lot of metaphors and similes. I don't know how many of them I mixed up along the way, but I think if you go back and listen to it once or twice at least, you will make more sense. You will understand more of it when you listen to it now, because you have heard the full sermon. I mean, that's the logic there. So there is really sense in what I'm saying there. The second time you listen to it, you will understand it better. And the third time, the person going to listen to it the third time is someone who knows more than when they went in to listen to it the second time. So that's the way it works. And of course, I don't mean go back and listen to every sermon 100 times. I know you don't have the time for that. But at least the ones that I say, these ones are important, you go back and listen to. It's because, as I say, I don't come here with a plan. There's not a bullet list of things I'm going to talk to you about today. This is our collective merit. Perhaps it's my merit, I don't know, because it's not me giving the sermon. This is just merit, manifestation of merit. Maybe it's I who need to understand what I'm just saying right now. Maybe the rest of you are not going to get what I'm saying. Or maybe there's someone else, and it's not me, somebody else who needs this. So engage in as much merit as you possibly can, and try to think of this as being a process. There's no person here doing it. There's no doer. This is just a process. A process is being run. Okay, so go back and listen to the sermon at least once, and there might be young children for whom it might have been a little bit heavy, and I'll encourage parents to help them understand it. Sometimes I do feel this, and I'm hoping I'm wrong here, but I'll put it out there just in case you fall into this bracket. Because if it is something you do, then I suggest that maybe you need to think improve. There's probably some room for improvement there. There's a voice in the back of my head saying that maybe in some households, the parents will probably get their children to sit in front of the sermon and get them to listen to it while the parents go about doing their own business. And the children will sit down, listen to the sermons. Puta, listen to the sermon. Swaminathan is going to talk to you. Listen to the sermon. And then the parents are busy going around doing other things, and they don't pay attention to the sermon. As I said, if you're not a good mother, your children will care. Oh, they'll make it known to you. If you're not a good wife, your husband will care, and he'll make it known to you. But if you're not concerned about your nibbana, no one's going to make it known to you. So I suggest, if you are one of those people, then maybe just consider planning your household duties and chores in a way where you're able to actually listen to these sermons with full attention. If you can't listen to it while the sermon is in progress, then at least go back and listen to it when after the sermon has concluded. What I'm trying to say is really, don't think that these sermons are for young children. It might have been when we first started them, but it's not anymore. When I see young children sat in front of me, again, it's collective merit. But right now, all I'm seeing is a computer screen. So there's literally no one sat in front of me. So this is just completely merit, which is not influenced by what I am seeing. It's completely driven by merit. So for you to be thinking that this is for young children, the English sermons for the young children, you get that out of your heads. You'd be wrong to think like that. I mean, it's fine, you can think like that, but I'm not the one who's missing out. Again, am I telling you off? I really hope you don't see it that way. I really, really hope. This is the duty of the Mahasangha, to encourage you to work towards your liberation. Why? Because there's no one else. There's no one else to do it. There's no one else to be behind your back saying, hey, wake up, get up, go and do this, put your timetables together, work you towards your liberation, do your 15 minutes. Who else is there to do it? Who else is there to remind you about this? That's the duty of the Mahasangha. You're doing your duty to look after the Mahasangha more than I could ever imagine. To look after them, to make sure that the requisites are given to them, and they can practice the path comfortably. So you're doing everything you can in terms of fulfilling your duty to the Mahasangha. It's our duty to ensure that you're doing your duty to yourself. And the thing is this: the more alms you give, the more donations you make, the more you look after the Sangha, and the more you put yourself the more you consider it your duty and obligation to look after the Sangha, I think the more stern I'll become on these sermons. The more I'll be on your backs and on your case. Because again, there's no me doing it. This is merit. This is your merit that's bringing these words out of my mouth. Because there'll be those of you who need to hear me say it in these words. That's why. Rather than saying, dear meritorious people, today we are going to do a sermon. There'll be those among you who just won't cut it if I said it in those words. So this is your merit. So make use of it. While your merit is being expended, make use of it, and please make sure you care about your salvation, because no one else does. Okay? So go back and listen to the sermon. Again, I've now said it 3 or 4 times. I won't say any more. Go back and listen to the sermon at least once again to try and understand some of the deep and profound concepts we talked about there. You can join that up with the previous sermons, particularly the one about who's on the chair. Right? You can go back and maybe listen to that and this one, and try and make as much sense as possible. But don't you worry if you do what you need to do and you don't understand it. There's nothing to worry. If you do what you do and you still don't get it, there's nothing to worry, because your merit will come to your rescue. But if you're not doing what you need to be doing, then you had better worry, because I can't help you there. Okay, so let us transfer the merits and bring the sermon to a close. First and foremost then, let us all remind ourselves that we are so extremely fortunate to be in receipt of the Buddha's teaching, because of the Bhikkhu Bhikkhunis, Upasaka Upasikas, who since time immemorial protected and preserved the teaching of the Buddha and passed it down through generations in the form of the Tripitaka and down to the noble lineage. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to transmit to all the members of the Mahasangha, wherever they may be resident throughout the world. There are men and women who have dedicated themselves to practicing the path, as well as have committed their lives to preach the Dhamma and help others to embark on the journey to their salvation. So that may they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also transmit to Guru Swami Mahansa, as well as all the other resident monks of this monastery, the Anagarikas, and also the Anagarikas who are attached to this monastery. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. And also let us take a moment to transfer these merits to all the devotees of the monastery, the friends of the monastery, who have made it their duty and responsibility to look after the Mahasangha, for all their commitment, dedication and donations that they have made. May to have helped all of you and I to practice the path, to develop ourselves and attain our liberation. May they are all deserving of these merits, and may they be able to rejoice in the merits that we have acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transmit merits to our parents, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, children, teachers, as well as friends and in relations, either distant or near, anyone and everyone who might have helped, supported us, assisted us in any way, shape or form they could, particularly in our difficult times. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, and may through the power of these merits, if any of them are in any form of difficulty in terms of their attainment of Nibbana, may such difficulties be removed from their path, and may they all be able to attain their liberation through ease and comfort. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transmit merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits and spirits, demons, and those among the dead, our ancestors who have predeceased us. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they, if any of them have been born in woeful planes, redeem themselves and be born in the blissful plane, and may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transmit merits to men, women and children who might have lost their lives in the war that ensued in Sri Lanka a long time ago, as well as those who might have lost their lives during the recent pandemic, as well as those who have made a lifelong commitment to helping those who are in distress and in trouble, including the members of the armed forces as well as the members of the health services. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have today passed away and been born in the woeful plane, may they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have acquired today, and may through the power of these merits they redeem themselves from such woeful planes and be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer these merits to men and women who have dedicated themselves to leading our country, to developing our nation and to safeguarding our nation, protecting it, and to maintain its peace and harmony, thanks to which we are today able to practice the path without any worries and concerns. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also not forget for a moment all those who have made huge commitments and have dedicated themselves to dispensing the teaching of the Buddha, particularly to the masses, by transliterating these sermons and making these sermons available to those who are unable to listen to them, and spreading the Dhamma in whatever capacity is available to them and they are able to do. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. And finally, may through the power of all the merits we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Vahanses and Arahat Mihinin Vahanses in this blessed land, in our very lives itself, and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may you and I and everyone who has contributed, however small or large, in whatever capacity they are capable of, may they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, and may to the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. Raga ginnen idetva, dvesha ginnen idetva, moha ginnen idetva, Nibbana parama sukhayan sukhita taravetva. Nibbana parama sukhayan sukhita taravetva. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva Nibbana parama sukhayen Sukhita taravetva Raga gini niveva Vesha gini niveva Moha gini niveva Nivan sata labeva Nivan sata labeva Nivan sata labeva තුනුරුවන්ගේ සූවිසි අනන්ත මහා ගුණ බෙලෙන් සියලු ලෝක සියලු සත්වයෝම නිබ්බාන පරම සුඛයෙන් සුඛිතතර වෙත්වා. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all forever. The sermon will now conclude. May the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.